30 years ago, Star Trek's greatest crossover launched TNG's movie franchise. 30 years ago, Star Trek's greatest crossover, Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, meeting Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, in Star Trek Generations, launched the Star Trek The Next Generation movie franchise. With the Star Trek The Original Series films waning at the box office, and Star Trek The Next Generation proving to be an increasingly popular hit in syndication, Paramount earmarked Captain Picard's USS Enterprise D crew to inherit the Star Trek movie franchise. The plan was to end TNG in Season 7 and immediately transition to a feature film. Paramount Studios' can't-miss gimmick to sell the film that became Star Trek Generations was Captain Picard meeting Captain Kirk. Initially, Paramount intended the entire Star Trek The Original Series cast to cameo, with Kirk and Picard teaming up in the finale. However, Leonard Nimoy, who turned down an offer to direct, and DeForest Kelley opted to skip Star Trek Generations, feeling they already said a proper farewell in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Only Walter Koenig and James Doohan agreed to appear. Still, Paramount had an ace in the whole climax to Star Trek Generations, the death of Captain Kirk. Star Trek Generations hinges on Captain Kirk and Captain Picard working together to stop the villainous Dr. Tolian Saran, Malcolm McDowell, from destroying a solar system, and the united captains of the Enterprise are indeed the piece de resistance of the film. Captain Kirk was a bona fide legend, while Captain Picard was approaching the zenith of his popularity in 1994. Picard and Kirk embodied their two generations of Star Trek, and the two captains meeting was an irresistible selling point. While Star Trek Generations only gave them a precious few scenes together, Patrick Stewart and William Shatner are a joy to watch. William Shatner in particular was at the top of his game, and he arguably steals Star Trek Generations from Patrick Stewart. Captain Picard is undeniably the movie's main hero, but Jean-Luc is also stern and rigid in the film. Comparatively, Shatner has a playful twinkle in his eye, and Kirk emits palpable charm and charisma, even though Star Trek Generations culminates in the original Enterprise captain's demise. No event in Star Trek, past or present, is as historical and notable for pop culture as Captain Kirk meeting Captain Picard. And to quote Picard in Star Trek Generations, "It's a moment that will never come again." Star Trek never resurrected Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk's death in Star Trek Generations was a Paramount Studios mandated gimmick to complete the passing of the torch from Star Trek The Original Series to Star Trek The Next Generation. Incredibly, William Shatner's Captain Kirk was never resurrected in canon. Star Trek Generations marked the last time William Shatner played Captain Kirk. Unlike Spock, Leonard Nimoy, Admiral Picard, and LT Commander Data, Brent Spiner, all of whom were killed and resurrected in Star Trek, Captain Kirk has remarkably stayed dead for 30 years. Instead of bringing Captain Kirk back to life, Star Trek introduced two younger versions of Kirk. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 rebooted the Star Trek movies in an alternate timeline, centering on Chris Pine's stellar performance as a young Captain James T. Kirk. Star Trek Strange New Worlds cast Paul Wesley, who becomes a boyish version of William Shatner as LT. James T. Kirk, the younger version of Shatner's captain in Star Trek's prime timeline. Meanwhile, William Shatner's original Captain Kirk will likely stay dead, as it is doubtful the 93-year-old Shatner will play Jim again. 30 years ago, in November 1994, Star Trek made a bold leap into a new era with Star Trek Generations, the film that bridged two iconic crews and launched Star Trek The Next Generation, TNG, onto the big screen. It was a monumental moment not only for Trek fans, but also for science fiction enthusiasts, as it marked the official passing of the torch from Captain James T. Kirk's original Enterprise crew to Captain Jean-Luc Picard's TNG ensemble. For 7 seasons, TNG had dominated television, continuing the Star Trek legacy with fresh characters, new stories, and a futuristic vision that resonated with a new generation of fans. However, while Star Trek movies featuring the original crew of Captain Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy had been successful for over a decade, TNG had not yet ventured into the cinematic realm. Generations provided the perfect opportunity to bring the two casts together in a high-stakes crossover that would not only honor the original Star Trek series, but also establish the future of the franchise on the big screen. The premise of Generations was ambitious, a plot that would intertwine the lives of Kirk and Picard in a way that transcended time and space. The movie opens with a dramatic sequence in which the original Enterprise B, captained by John Harriman, embarks on its maiden voyage, with Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov on board as honored guests. However, the ship soon encounters an anomaly known as the Nexus, a mysterious energy ribbon that traps and obliterates everything in its path. In true Kirk fashion, the legendary captain takes the helm to save the crew, but he is swept away by the Nexus, presumed dead by those aboard the Enterprise. Flash forward 78 years to the time of TNG, where the crew of the Enterprise D, led by Picard, faces their own challenges. A new villain, Dr. Tolian Saran, played by Malcolm McDowell, has sinister plans involving the Nexus. Saran is a scientist consumed by his desire to re-enter the Nexus, where he once experienced an idyllic, timeless existence. His plan to destroy entire star systems to achieve his goal brings him into conflict with Picard and the Enterprise crew. The heart of Generations lies in the eventual meeting of Kirk and Picard, two captains with very different leadership styles, personalities, and worldviews. In the film's climactic sequence, Picard enters the Nexus, where he finds Kirk living a dreamlike existence, seemingly unaware of time's passage. The two captains join forces to stop Saran and save millions of lives, culminating in a dramatic showdown on the surface of a planet. This crossover between Kirk and Picard was a dream come true for many fans. Kirk, the action-driven, larger-than-life swashbuckler, and Picard, the more thoughtful, diplomatic leader, represented two distinct eras of Star Trek. Their meeting was not just about stopping Saran, it was a symbolic moment acknowledging the legacy of Kirk's Enterprise while passing the baton to Picard and his crew. Picard's victory at the end of the film marked the true beginning of the TNG era in Star Trek films, with the torch officially passed from the original cast to the new. Yet, the film was also a bittersweet farewell for Captain Kirk. While some fans were excited to see Kirk in action one more time, others were disappointed by his fate. Kirk dies during the climactic battle, sacrificing himself to save the galaxy one last time. For some, this felt like a fitting end for the legendary captain, who had always lived on the edge, risking everything for the greater good. For others, it was a jarring end to one of science fiction's most beloved characters. Regardless of the mixed reactions, Kirk's death cemented Generations as one of the most memorable moments in Star Trek history. The film also marked a turning point for the franchise. After Generations, TNG would go on to have 3 more films, each building on the success of the series and expanding the Star Trek universe. Star Trek: First Contact, 1996, is widely regarded as one of the best entries in the Trek film series, blending action, time travel, and the terrifying Borg into a thrilling narrative. Star Trek: Insurrection, 1998, and Star Trek: Nemesis, 2002, continued the adventures of the Enterprise D, though they received more mixed reviews. In retrospect, Star Trek: Generations was a landmark moment, not just for its crossover appeal, but for its place in the broader Star Trek story. It honored the past while boldly embracing the future, allowing TNG to thrive in a new medium. While not without its flaws, the film achieved what it set out to do: unite two legendary captains, provide closure for the original crew, and launch a new era of Star Trek films. As we look back 30 years later, Generations remains a testament to the enduring power of Star Trek and its ability to evolve while staying true to its core message of exploration, unity, and hope. It was more than just a crossover, it was the beginning of a new journey.